Imagine spending Valentine's Day in a jail cell for wearing high heels or forgetting your wife's birthday. Love is often called a battlefield, but in some corners of the globe, the government has actually written the rules of engagement. From state-mandated chores to illegal kisses, we've unearthed 50 bizarre laws that dictate how you date, marry, and break up. By the end, you'll realize that your romantic dinner is actually a legal minefield just waiting to explode. 1. In Scotland, if your girlfriend pops the question on February 29th, think very carefully before rejecting her. According to a 13th century tradition, a man who denies a leap year proposal is legally obligated to pay a fine. Historically, this meant buying the jilted lady a silk dress or 12 pairs of expensive gloves to hide her ringless hand. It's the only day of the year where a no carries a literal price tag, turning a romantic rejection into a mandatory shopping spree for your ex. 2. In Indonesia's Aceh province, the dating police take the third wheel concept to a criminal level. They enforce a law called kalwat, making it illegal for an unmarried couple to be alone in a secluded place. A quiet evening in a parked car or a private picnic can lead to public shaming or even corporal punishment. The government essentially criminalized the private part of a date to prevent temptation. Honestly, do you think a little government supervision would make first dates less awkward? Or is this the ultimate romance killer? 3. Planning a romantic getaway in Pakistan? Leave the heart-shaped balloons at home. In 2017, the High Court in Islamabad officially banned Valentine's Day celebrations in all public spaces. The government views the holiday as a Western import that promotes indecency. This means no red roses in windows, no cards, and no televised romantic specials. It's a state-mandated Grinch move against St. Valentine, turning a global day of love into a potential legal offense for anyone caught being too festive. 4. In Greece, getting married requires a trip to the local newspaper. By law, couples must publish a wedding notice in a journal or post it at the town hall for at least 8 days before the ceremony. This isn't for socialites. It's a legal last call for anyone with a valid reason to object, like a secret first family. It turns your private commitment into a public announcement, ensuring that if you have skeletons in your closet, the local paper gives them a very loud voice. 5. High society weddings in Monaco require a 2-step legal marathon. Under the civil code, it is strictly illegal to perform a religious wedding ceremony before a civil one is finalized. A priest can actually face legal trouble for blessing a union before the government has its say. Your dream cathedral wedding is technically a crime unless you've signed the boring paperwork at the mayor's office first. It's the state's way of ensuring that while God might recognize your love, the Prince of Monaco definitely comes first. 6. Public displays of affection in Dubai are more than just cringe. They can lead to a jail cell. Under public decency laws, kissing or aggressive hugging in public often results in immediate arrest and deportation, while holding hands is generally tolerated for married couples. Anything more passionate is a criminal offense. It's a jarring reminder that your romantic main character moment can end abruptly with a very unromantic police report and a one-way ticket out of the country. 7. For decades, South Korea enforced Article 809, making it illegal for two people with the same last name and ancestral hometown to marry. This wasn't about being cousins. It was about ancient clan structures. Even if you were unrelated by blood, sharing the name Kim from the Gimhae region meant your love was legally forbidden. Couples lived in a legal no man's land for years because the state refused to recognize their union. If the person you loved shared your last name, would you fight the Supreme Court to prove your love is unique? 8. Ancient Rome gave women a rare veto over their father's romantic choices. While the male head of the household arranged all marriages, a daughter could legally refuse a match if she proved the prospective groom was of unworthy character. If the guy was a notorious drunk or a known coward, she could invoke the law to block the union. It was the first vibe check in legal history, proving that even 2,000 years ago, The government realized some guys just aren't worth the dowry. 9. In Australia, the government might decide you are married, even if you never had a wedding. Under de facto laws, if you live with a partner for 2 years, the law treats you as a married couple regarding property and assets. You don't get the tax breaks of a wedding, but you certainly get the divorce headaches if you split. The state essentially looks at your shared rent and says, close enough. Does the idea of the government accidentally marrying you sound like a convenient safety net or a terrifying loss of single status? 10. Japan previously imposed a mandatory cool-down period for women after a divorce. For over a century, a woman was legally barred from remarrying for 6 months after ending a previous marriage to avoid paternity confusion regarding potential pregnancies. While the law was recently shortened and challenged, it remains a jarring example of the state using a woman's biological clock as a legal regulator. It effectively told women that their freedom to love again was secondary to the government's need for tidy, uncomplicated paperwork. 11. Turkey has a digital age solution for when the romance dies, but it's strictly a one-way street. In 2017, the country's religious directorate ruled that a husband can divorce his wife via text message, fax, or even a simple letter. As long as he uses the word talak 3 times, the marriage is spiritually over in the eyes of their faith. While the civil courts still require a mountain of paperwork, this ruling created a bizarre double reality where a couple could be legally married by the state but divorced via a WhatsApp notification. Imagine getting a "you up" text followed immediately by a "we're done" message. Is a digital breakup cold? Or is it just the most efficient way to handle a 21st century relationship? 12. If you're driving through the picturesque town of Eboli, Italy, keep your hands on the wheel and your lips to yourself. A local ordinance makes it illegal to kiss in a moving vehicle. Getting caught in a passionate embrace at a red light could cost you a fine of over $500. It's a steep price for a cinematic moment, turning a romantic drive into a very expensive traffic violation. 13. In Iran, sigha, or temporary marriage, allows a couple to be legally wed for a specific period, ranging from 1 hour to 99 years. This practice is often used as a legal loophole for couples who want to date or hold hands in public without being harassed by the morality police. You sign a contract, agree on a time frame and a dowry, and suddenly your date is a state-sanctioned union. It's basically a high-stakes, legally binding version of exclusive dating that comes with government-stamped paperwork and a very clear expiration date. 14. In South Carolina, being a lousy spouse can follow you beyond the grave. If a husband abandons his wife and is found living in adultery with someone else at the time of her death, he loses all legal right to inherit any of her property. The law essentially acts as a post-mortem middle finger, ensuring that if you checked out of the relationship emotionally and physically, the state will make sure you're checked out of the will too. It's a rare instance of the legal system enforcing the "for better or worse" clause, with extreme prejudice long after the pulse has stopped. 15. On the island of Capri, Italy, being a noisy lover isn't just rude, it's a public nuisance. Local bylaws are famously strict about disturbing the peace, and couples have been fined for everything from loud arguments to, well, enthusiastic celebrations of their love. The island prides itself on a quiet, elite atmosphere, meaning the state expects your passion to be seen and not heard. If you're planning a honeymoon here, you might want to invest in some soundproofing or a very thick pillow. 16. Until as recently as 2020, Taiwan was one of the few non-Muslim societies where adultery was a criminal offense punishable by up to a year in prison. It wasn't just a messy divorce issue, it was a call the police issue. Private investigators made a fortune helping spouses catch the other person in the act so the state could step in with handcuffs. Does the idea of a jail sentence for infidelity make people more loyal? Or does it just turn a private tragedy into a public circus? 17. Kentucky has a bizarre, specific limit on your indecisiveness. According to an old state law, A woman cannot marry the same man 4 times. You get 3 chances to make it work, but by the 4th attempt, the state steps in and says, enough is enough. It's a legislative intervention for the on-again, off-again couples who can't decide if they're soulmates or mortal enemies. Apparently, the bluegrass state believes that if you haven't figured it out after the 3rd wedding, a 4th one isn't going to help. 18. In many Canadian provinces, the engagement ring is legally viewed as a conditional gift. This means the contract is, I give you this ring on the condition that we get married. If the wedding is called off, regardless of who cheated or who got cold feet, the ring must legally be returned to the person who bought it. It removes the emotional compensation aspect of keeping the jewelry, treating a diamond more like a security deposit on a house that you decided not to move into. 19. For a long time in Lebanon, a controversial law known as Article 522 offered a horrifying get-out-of-jail-free card for attackers. If a man kidnapped or assaulted a woman, he could be cleared of all criminal charges if he agreed to marry his victim. It was a law based on the toxic idea of preserving family honor through a forced union. Thankfully, after years of intense activism, the law was repealed in 2017. It stands as a chilling reminder of a time when the legal system viewed a marriage certificate as a valid substitute for a prison sentence. 20. In Maryland, insanity is a legitimate, specific ground for divorce, but the state makes you work for it. To dump your spouse under this rule, they must have been confined to a mental institution for at least 3 years, and 2 doctors must testify that the condition is incurable. It's a grim, bureaucratic way of saying, in sickness and in health, unless it's been 1,095 days of this. If you knew your partner's condition was permanent, would you stay bound to them legally for life, or would you take the 3-year escape hatch provided by the state? 21. In Hong Kong, an old law allegedly grants a wife the legal right to kill her unfaithful husband. But there is a very specific catch. She must do it with her bare hands. No poison, no pistols, and no hired help. Just a manual labor approach to marital justice. It's the ultimate hands-on conflict resolution that makes a standard divorce settlement look like a relaxing spa day. Imagine the sheer physical determination required to execute that sentence. Do you think the high effort involved in this law acts as a better deterrent for cheating than a simple lawsuit? 22. Until 2012, if you wanted to get married in England or Wales, you were racing against the sunset every single time. A law dating back to 1836 mandated that all weddings take place between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. The original intent was to prevent secret, middle-of-the-night elopements and ensure the ceremony was a public, daylight affair. If your reception ran late and the priest hadn't signed the book by tea time, you were technically out of luck. It turned every British wedding into a high-speed sprint to the altar before the evening news started. 23. In 19th century Austria, the poor law allowed local officials to legally block marriages between people who didn't own a certain amount of property or a stable trade. The government's logic was that if you couldn't afford a house, you shouldn't be allowed to start a family and potentially become a burden on the taxpayers. It turned the most romantic decision of your life into a cold, hard financial audit by the village elders. It was the ultimate gatekeeping of love, where your bank balance determined your legal right to have a soulmate. 24. If you're a man in Wichita, Kansas, you might want to rethink that funny joke about your mother-in-law before you open your mouth. A local ordinance once declared that a man's mistreatment of his mother-in-law could be used as valid grounds for a divorce. In Wichita, respect your elders isn't just a polite suggestion, it's a prenuptial survival strategy enforced by the city council. The law recognizes that a toxic relationship with the extended family can be just as corrosive as a fight between the spouses themselves, making "be nice to her mom" a legal mandate. 25. North Carolina has a very specific rule for couples who like to play make-believe at local hotels. It is illegal to register at a lodging establishment as a married couple if you aren't actually married. This law was originally designed to curb immoral weekend flings, turning a standard hotel check-in into a potential criminal investigation. If you're looking to spice things up with a little role play as Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you might want to keep your fake identities for a state that doesn't care who is actually wearing the wedding ring. 26. For centuries in England, the law was surprisingly picky about what kind of jewelry you put on your finger. To be legally recognized, a wedding ring had to be made of gold. If you were poor and tried to use a ring made of iron or tin, the church could technically refuse to perform the ceremony. It was a legislative way of saying that if you couldn't afford the precious metal, you weren't substantial enough to enter into a holy union. It proves that for most of history, the government viewed marriage primarily as a financial merger rather than a romantic bond. 27. In parts of India, people born under the astrological sign Manglik are believed to carry a curse that causes the early death of their spouse. To break this celestial bad luck, tradition and certain legal interpretations allow them to first marry a peepal tree or even a silver urn. The spouse, the tree, is then destroyed, effectively killing the curse and leaving the person free to marry a human without any supernatural casualties. It's a fascinating example of the legal system bending to accommodate the stars. Do you believe your zodiac sign should be a legal factor in marriage? 28. In 19th century England, the Marriage Act required all wedding ceremonies to be performed with the doors of the chapel left wide open to the public. This was a legal requirement to ensure that no one was being forced into a clandestine or secret marriage against their will or under duress. If you locked the doors to keep the ceremony private or intimate, the entire union could technically be declared legally void. It's a fascinating reminder that the state once viewed the absolute transparency of your I do as more important than your privacy. Do you think weddings should still be strictly public affairs? Or is the government overstepping by inviting the whole town to your big moment? 29. In Georgia, don't even think about pulling a speak now or forever hold your peace stunt just for a laugh. It is illegal to interrupt or disturb a wedding ceremony in a way that prevents it from finishing. If you stand up to object just for the drama of it, you aren't a romantic hero. You're a criminal. The state views the wedding ceremony as a protected legal proceeding, and any disruption is treated as a breach of the peace. Does this law protect the sanctity of the day, or does it stifle a person's last chance to prevent a mistake? 30. Let's look at ancient Ireland's hand fasting law, which was the original one-year lease on a relationship. Couples could legally marry for exactly 1 year and 1 day. At the end of that period, they would return to the spot where they wed and decide if they wanted to renew the contract or just walk away. It was a state-sanctioned trial marriage that removed the messiness of a permanent divorce. If you could test drive a marriage for 366 days with a guaranteed exit button at the end, do you think people would find their actual soulmates faster? 31. In 19th century France, a man couldn't get married without his parents' permission until he was 25, and a woman until she was 21. Even after that, if they were under 30, they had to serve their parents with a respectful summons via a notary 3 times to prove they tried to ask nicely. It turned every romantic engagement into a years-long bureaucratic war with your future in-laws. If your parents hated your partner, the law basically gave them a decade-long veto over your happiness, proving that in France, your mother-in-law was legally the boss. 32. New Mexico has a unique rule regarding common law marriages that acts as a legal bridge between states. While the state doesn't allow you to start a common law marriage within its own borders, it will legally recognize one if you established it in another state before moving in. It's a legal grandfather clause for your relationship, ensuring that your status doesn't vanish the moment you cross the state line. Does it make sense for a relationship's legal status to be tied to geography, or should the law recognize your commitment regardless of where you live? 33. In India, there is a controversial legal concept called the restitution of conjugal rights. If one spouse leaves the other without a reasonable excuse, the abandoned partner can actually go to court and get a legal order forcing the other spouse to return home. The state essentially tries to legislate domestic harmony by ordering you to live under the same roof again. It's a jarring attempt to save a marriage through a court-mandated roommate agreement. If someone truly wants to leave a relationship, do you think a judge's order can actually fix a broken heart? 34. Ancient Egyptian marriage laws were actually designed to keep wealth and power within a single family line, leading to frequent marriages between brothers and sisters. This wasn't about romance. It was a cold, calculated legal maneuver to ensure that vast estates and royal titles didn't get diluted by marriage to outsiders. While it sounds like a plot from a dark fantasy novel, for thousands of years, the highest levels of society viewed incest as the most efficient way to manage a family trust fund and secure the throne. 35. Under a long-standing Rhode Island statute, any marriage contracted by a person who is deemed mentally incompetent is considered absolutely void from the beginning. Unlike other states where you might need a complex annulment process, Rhode Island law treats the union as if it literally never existed in the first place. It places an incredible amount of pressure on the state to define competence, turning a simple wedding license into a de facto mental health screening. It's the state's way of saying that if you weren't all there at the altar, you aren't married in the office. 36. In parts of China, ghost marriages are a complex legal and cultural phenomenon where a ceremony is performed between two deceased people, or even one living person and a corpse. The goal is to ensure that a deceased relative isn't lonely in the afterlife, or to complete a family lineage that would otherwise end. While the government has cracked down on the more extreme versions of this practice, the unofficial legal recognition of these unions in rural customs highlights how some traditions view the "until death do us part" clause as a mere suggestion. 37. Delaware has an obscure law that allows for a marriage to be annulled if one spouse takes a vow of perpetual chastity or enters a monastic order shortly after the wedding. Essentially, if your partner decides that their true love is actually a silent monastery and they plan to never see you again, the state gives you an immediate legal exit. It treats a religious calling as a material breach of the marital contract, ensuring you aren't legally tied to someone who has literally checked out of the physical world. 38. Switzerland has some of the world's strictest laws against sham marriages, designed for residency permits. Civil registrars are legally empowered to interview couples and deny a marriage license if they suspect the union is strictly for the purpose of obtaining a passport. They can ask deeply personal questions about your daily habits, your partner's favorite food, or the specific details of your first date. It turns your wedding application into a high-stakes job interview with a cynical government department. Do you think the state should have the right to judge if your love is real enough? 39. In ancient Greece, specifically under the philosophical laws of Plato, the perfect age for marriage was strictly regulated by the state for the benefit of society. Men were encouraged to wait until they were 30, while women were expected to marry as young as 18. The logic was that a man needed a decade of military service to be mature, while a woman needed to be at her peak health for childbearing. It was a state-mandated age gap designed to produce the strongest possible citizens, treating the family unit like a breeding program for the state. 40. In Singapore, if you are under the age of 21 and want to get married, the law requires you to attend a mandatory marriage preparation program before you can get your license. The state essentially forces you to take a How to Be a Spouse class to ensure you aren't making an impulsive teenage mistake. It's the government's way of acting as a concerned parent, forcing young couples to look at the boring practical side of life, like budgeting and conflict resolution, before they are allowed to get caught up in the romance. 41. Spain turned the "who does the dishes" argument into national law. Since 2005, the Spanish civil marriage contract includes a binding clause requiring men to share in domestic chores and caregiving. It's no longer just a domestic spat. It's a breach of contract to let your spouse do all the heavy lifting. This turns every unwashed plate into a potential legal exhibit in a future divorce. Do you think your relationship would survive if your partner could literally sue you for failing to vacuum the living room? 42. France has a law proving true love doesn't care about a pulse. Under Article 171 of the Civil Code, you can legally marry a dead person if you provide grave reasons and proof the deceased intended to marry you while alive. This requires the personal signature of the President of France. You don't get inheritance rights or a new tax bracket, but you do gain the legal status of a widow or widower. It is the ultimate commitment for those who believe that "until death do us part" is far too short a timeline. 43. We've all seen the classic movie scene where a ship's captain marries a couple during a storm, but in real life, that's almost always a legal myth. In most jurisdictions, including the United States and the United Kingdom, a sea captain has no inherent power to perform a marriage ceremony just because they command a vessel. Unless the captain is also a licensed minister, a judge, or a notary public, your romantic sea wedding is essentially just an expensive rehearsal. If you try to file those papers on land, the government will inform you that you're still very much single. 44. Israel's marriage system is governed by religious courts, which can lead to the heart-wrenching situation of the aguna, or chained wife. Under Jewish law, a divorce is only final when the husband physically hands a document called a get to his wife. If he refuses, she is legally barred from remarrying, even if they have been separated for decades. The state can even imprison a man for refusing, yet they cannot technically force him to sign. Is a religious tradition more important than an individual's right to move on, or should the state stay out of the sanctuary? 45. If you believe a third party ruined your marriage, North Carolina is the place for revenge. The state still allows alienation of affection lawsuits, where a jilted spouse can sue a homewrecker for millions in damages. You don't even have to prove an affair happened. You just have to show that the outsider's actions led to the loss of love in your household. It treats a partner's affection like a piece of stolen property, turning a messy breakup into high-stakes corporate litigation. 46. In Hawaii, seduction isn't just a plot point in a romance novel. It's a potential lawsuit. Under their heart balm laws, a person can be sued for promising to marry someone just to get them into bed. If you use a fake engagement as romantic bait, the law says you've breached a contract and caused actionable emotional damage. It turns a pump-and-dump scenario into a courtroom battle over the value of a broken promise. It makes you wonder, should the government really be the ones deciding the price of a broken heart? 47. Utah has a fascinating way of backdating your relationship if you've lived together for years. Through a process called unsolomnized marriage, a couple can petition a court to declare they have been married all along, even without a ceremony. If you've been presenting yourselves as a couple and sharing a life, a judge can effectively wave a magic wand and say, "You've been legally wed since the beginning." It's a powerful tool for securing Social Security or inheritance rights, proving that sometimes the government is the one trying to make it official. 48. The Tidong people of Indonesia have a honeymoon tradition focused more on bladder control than romance. Newlyweds are forbidden from using the bathroom for 3 full days after the wedding. Relatives monitor the couple, rationing food to prevent accidents, believing that breaking this rule invites bad luck or infidelity. It turns the first 72 hours of marriage into a grueling endurance test. Could your relationship survive 3 days of marital bliss without a single bathroom break? 49. For the ultimate DIY wedding, Montana offers the double proxy marriage. It is the only state where neither the bride nor the groom needs to be present for the ceremony. You can literally hire 2 strangers to stand in for you and sign the paperwork while you're on a different continent. It's popular for military members stationed overseas, but it also creates a bizarre reality where 2 people who have never met can become legally bound for life through proxies. If neither person is there to say "I do," is it still a wedding or just an efficient business transaction? All right, we have covered 49 points of legal madness, and we have just one left. But before we reveal number 50, it is time for the final verdict. In our opinion, the award for the most incredible rule in this video goes to the leap year fine in Scotland. The idea that a man has to pay a glove tax just for saying no to a proposal is peak historical comedy. It is a law that literally monetizes a bruised ego. Do you agree with our verdict, or is there a bigger offender on our list? Let us know in the comments. And now, for our final number. 50. Since 1910, it has been technically illegal to kiss on train platforms in France. This wasn't a law against romance. It was a law against delays. Passionate, lingering farewells were causing trains to fall behind schedule, so the government stepped in to keep commuters moving. While you won't see an officer with a stopwatch today, the law has never been formally repealed. It's a perfect reminder that even in the most romantic country on earth, the government's need for an on-time train will always beat your need for a Hollywood-style goodbye. Love isn't just chemistry. It's a complex dance with the legal system. As we've seen, the state often has very specific and highly intrusive ideas about how you should woo and wed. Whether it's dodging a glove tax or timing your bathroom breaks, these rules prove that happily ever after usually comes with a mountain of fine print. If you could legally ban one annoying habit your partner has, what would it be? Tell us your most creative ideas in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to stay smart.